how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I am your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then talk about it. And today we are talking about Jentry Chau versus the Underworld. So I eventually heard about this show, I think on TikTok, and it looked something akin to like Juniper Lee or American Dragon Jake Long, but like for kids nowadays. So I was like, all right, cool, let me give this a try. I know the main character is voiced by Ali Wong, and I think she's, pretty cool. So I was like, all right, let me give this show a try. And I got some thoughts about it. But let's start off with the premise. So the premise on IMDb states a Chinese-American teen living in a small Texas town finds out a demon king is hunting her for the supernatural powers she's been working her whole life to repress. Now, that is right and wrong, in my opinion. But if you haven't watched the show, you'll see what I'm talking about, because what I do is I go through the plot beat by beat. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. So we start off with we start off with Jentry and her friends, and they are at a karaoke place. They're singing karaoke. I don't know why I'm making it complicated. Her turn to sing, and apparently she always sings Pretty Savage by Blackpink. And they're like, oh, she's probably going to do it again. And she's like, basically like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so she starts singing the song. The camera kind of pans up to an air duct, and you see something move by really quick. So something's happening, but we're immediately outside. Her and her friends are heading back to their dorm, and they are in Korea. So you assume that she's going to some sort of like boarding school in Korea, and this is where she gets a FaceTime from Gugu, who is like the nickname for her grandma. So Gugu is pretty chill. She like makes a joke about, oh, me and your friend gotta like have a rematch about mahjong. The girl's like, yo, it's on. And, she's like, oh, Jentry, you have a bunch of like pimples on your face. I got a cream for that. And she's like, grandma, chill out. So she's cool, but embarrassing, just like family is. And she's like, I'm going to take this call by myself. I'll see you guys later. So she's walking down alleys by herself on this FaceTime, which I thought was a weird move, but whatever. So she's having this call, and you see some sort of shadow behind her, until it hits a point where it makes a noise, and then she looks to go see. And this is where she sees this, like, it looks like almost a little ghost kid / man. And so we get this terrifying moment where its face, like, starts spinning like a slot machine. And then it gets really big, and its face is still spinning. And then it kind of turns into a mask. And I thought that was less scary than when its face was actually spinning. I thought for some reason that was terrifying, just because you couldn't really... There's something, like, otherworldly about it, but like just the regular mask is just like whatever. And this is where we have one of the moments that if you see me look down or like away, I'm looking at my notes, where we have one of these moments that immediately like dropped the show down for me, where she's like makes a joke about like, hey grandma, like you ever seen one of these before?
Gugu, remember that book of creepy demons you had when I was a kid? Was this thing in there?
She gets attacked, and she's getting chased. And despite the monster not looking scary, the way it moves kind of like a snake, and it's like super fast, and it's big, it's like a giant, it's like really terrifying, and the music is picking up, and Gentry's running for her life. She gets stuck in a corner, or like her back against the wall essentially, and this thing comes at her, and her hands kind of ignite like she has superpowers, and they catch on fire. And she's like, oh, like, I got you now, like, kind of back up. But as she goes to, like, touch it, her hands unignite, and the thing's like, I got you now. So it goes to attack her. She grabs a trash can lid. She hits it. And apparently that was enough to, like, knock it back to its, like, smaller form. And then she just goes in, which is what I love. Because anytime you watch something scary, like, a lot of times when people get the advantage, they just run away. And I'm like, no, you have the advantage. Like, use that fear and, like, go in. Use the fight, not the flight. And so she just starts smacking this thing in the face. And this is where, again, the show drops down again. It was so good. And he's like, whoa, chill out. Like, why are you not scared of me anymore? And she's like, well, I just beat you up with a trash can lid, so, like, you're not really scaring me anymore. And he's like, well, if I had a trash can lid, then we'd be on even, an even playing field. And she's like, you attacked me. And then he's like, whatever. And this is where I forget the reason why, but he kind of introduces himself, and he's like, my name's Ed. like Edward Cullen, and then he like transforms his face into the vampire from Twilight, and I was just like, what is this?
Yeah, well, Shut up! Tell me what you are and what you want.
I'm Ed, named after Edward Cullen, the most commercially successful undead guy ever.
But this is where we learn that he is keeping an eye out for Mr. Chang, and he's watching Jentry. We learn that Mr. Chang is a Mogwai. Now, the show at this point hasn't said what a Mogwai is, so you gotta assume it's a higher demon, I guess. Yeah, so apparently Mr. Chang wants to kill her and take her soul and her powers. Ed tries to transform again, but before he can really do anything, Goo, Grandma, shows up, puts a little talisman on top of his head, and that kind of stops him in his tracks. She's like, oh, like she's in the know. She's like, oh, hey, Jentry, like, hey, I caught an earlier flight. Like, I'm so glad to see that your powers are back. And she's like, Grandma, what the hell is going on? We cut to like the two of them in Gentry's room, and they're packing up her stuff. And she's like, yeah, I'm just going to take you back to Texas for a couple days. We're going to fight and kill Mr. Chang. And, that'll be the end of all of this. They put Ed in a suitcase and like, tied it all up. Gentry's like, hey, did you know about, this stuff going on? And she's like, yeah, I've kind of known about like all of this like supernatural stuff for pretty much your entire life. And she's like, what? And she's like, yeah, but we'll figure it out. We move on to the two of them kind of heading out to Texas, going through TSA, getting on the plane, and they're just having a casual conversation all loud about like, oh yeah, he's a demon and blah, 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 and you have superpowers and yada, yada. And I'm like, is there no like discretion? Like, shouldn't you guys be on the hush hush? Like, there's even a moment where like TSA like looks at them like, the hell are they talking about?
I was trying to kill the Mogwai before he got to you. That's why I made the deal with him to leave you alone until you were 16.
So, you made a deal so he could murder me on my birthday. Cool! Very cool!
This is where we learn on the plane that Jentry is Chinese. I thought she was Korean just because, she was in Korea. But no, she is Chinese. Apparently, the reason that Mr. Chang hasn't attacked her before is because Grandma made a deal, I guess when she was like super little, and was like, or for Jentry, when Jentry was super little, basically being like, hey, you can have her powers when she's like of age, and kind of comes into them. And of course, Gentry's like, what the fuck? And then we also learned that he just wants her essentially for her powers, and that her powers are more than just fire coming out of her hands. They land in Riverford, Texas. Jentry is not looking real happy about it. Grandma, grabs her hand, and she's like, oh, it's been so long since, whatever the incident happened. So like, try not to worry about it. And, Gentry's like, oh, it's been like, 8 years. Who even remembers? And then you get this, not mural, but almost like a mural of like this little demon girl setting the town of Riverford, Texas on fire. So they remember for sure, but the grandma's like, they don't remember it's you. They just remember that like this little girl did all of this. So we head over to Grandma's house. Grandma's house has ghosts in it. So like the door closes by itself. The suitcases float upstairs. We see pictures of Gentry's parents. Apparently, they're dead. We move into Gugu's secret lair, or study, as she likes to call it. So, in her closet, she has like this kind of like sigil with these two like lion, I forget what they're called. These two like lion statues. And a portal opens up, and they walk inside, and then we get into the next issue I have with this show, which is that Grandma has basically saying like, hey, killing a what is it called? A Mogwai, killing a Mogwai, so Mr. Chang, the thing that they're supposed to fight, is nearly impossible. So Grandma has been going all around the world, collecting all of these weapons, hoping that one of them will be enough to kill him for good. And she's like, I found these two like wheels, and they used to have magic powers in them, specifically fire, and they've gone out, but you can do fire. So she's like, if you put your fire on the wheels, I'll take out Mr. Chang for you. So my issue with this is that, first off, it's super specific. Like, you know, I found a specific weapon that needs fire and you just happen to have fire. I mean, that's just plot. The main thing is like, and we'll get more into this as I keep going through the plot, is the grandma seems like sometimes she knows like what to do about the supernatural, and then sometimes she's like absolutely clueless. So the fact that like she's had all this time to figure out how to kill this thing, and she's like, one of these things got to work, right? But then when it came to Ed, she was like, oh, I know if I just put a talisman on him, he'll like chill out and we can like incapacitate him. So I was like, how much do you actually know about this? Like, do you actually have a plan to like save your granddaughter's life? Like, it's super unclear. And to be like, maybe this works if you can put your powers on it. And who's to say if she even could figure out her powers? You know what I mean? So it's like, Grandma, we're flying too much by the seat of our pants. I need you to kind of lock in a little more. So yeah, I was like, because usually like when you're watching any type of like anime or whatever, it would be more of like, Grandma has the skills, but she's too old. You know what I mean? She can't, or she doesn't have enough power, and that's why the younger character has to do it. So for Grandma to be kind of lost, it's like, well, then what the hell is Jentry gonna do? You know what I mean? But we'll move on for now. Jentry feels some type of way. She goes to her room. She's upset. Grandma goes to talk to her, and this is where they have this really nice but awkward, not awkward as in like the conversation itself. I just think of where it's placed in the show, of Jentry being like, is this really my life now? Like, I gotta go fight demons and like have mystical powers and all this other stuff.
But I never wanted it to be normal for me. I don't want to start magic fires or fight demons. I just want to be a regular teenager.
And I think it's just weird because the only thing we've seen her do is fight Ed, and she beat him with a trash can. And now Grandma was like, hey, you gotta fight this other thing. But she hasn't done anything else with her powers, really, or like really had to face anything that weird, because she already knew that her grandma's house was haunted. So for her to already be like, is this really my life now? It's like, nothing's really changed for real. This should have been like a episode 3 conversation, you know, after she's fought a couple of demons, maybe something went wrong, like she was supposed to hang out with her friends or whatever, and then she had to fight a demon instead, you know, something like that, just to have her really be like, damn, like, I just want to have a normal life. But I just felt like this is way too early to have this conversation. Grandma is basically like, hey, if we beat Mr. Chang, you know, everything will go back to normal. She gives her an early birthday gift, and it is a little necklace with or a locket, I don't know what you technically call it. Opens up inside, has a little picture of Grandma in there, and it says like, I love you, Jentry. It has a little evil eye on the outside, and if you don't know, the evil eye is supposed to protect you from like dark energy and like spirits and stuff like that. Day passes. The next day, Jentry goes to go into the secret lair, and the 2 statues come alive. And she's like, what the hell, you guys weren't alive yesterday? And they're like, whatever, like, give us the password. And she ends up giving them the password, and it's like a dumb like computer password. It's a dumb joke, but I thought it was a little funny.
Have you been deemed worthy to possess the knowledge of her secret password? That even the sharpest of minds get stumped by its complexity.
Goo rocks 1 2 3 4.
Correct?
So I was like, okay, this humor kind of works for me. We go inside, and Jentry trips over some of the weapons that are scattered all on the floor. And apparently Grandma has been up trying to kill Ed with every weapon that she's acquired. Ed is like, I am a Zhongxi. I don't know how to say it. He's like, we're already dead. We can't be killed. We're basically like the cockroaches of the Underworld. Grandma's like, well, I'm sure something here will get rid of you. So again, it's like, Grandma, how much do you actually know? And the fact that you're like, I don't know, I got all these weapons. One of them got to kill this lesser demon. So it's like, if you can't figure out how to get the little guy, who's the underling, which he said he's the underling, then like, how do you know that you're going to beat the big boss? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense, and I think it's just bad writing, and it makes the grandma seem like she really doesn't know what she's doing. And I'm like, it's kind of hard for me to root for you when it's like, hey, tomorrow or like tonight, whatever, we're going to have to like decide whether we can save your life or not. And grandma's just like, I don't know, let's try one of these things. Maybe we'll figure it out. I'm like, hello? Gigi. Gugu? Is that what it is? Yeah, Gugu wants Jentry to set the wheels on fire so she can kind of test them out. And she's like, listen, stress is what fuels you. So, like, what stresses you out? And she's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that I was like a regular teenager and now I gotta fight like a demon. She manages to lock in and ignite the wheels. Gives them to the grandma. Grandma goes over. She goes to, like, strike Ed. And right before she hits him, the fire goes away. And she's like, man, we got to figure out how to, like, make it last longer. And then instead of having Jentry move a little closer so that she could try it again on Ed, because she had to, like, do a little run and then, like, try to swing at him. So I was like, oh, just have her move closer, and that way you can just, like, pass it, slice. You know what I mean? They don't do that. Obviously, it's for the plot because they want Ed to be around. But I was like, why wouldn't you just try again, but, like, in a different manner? You know what I mean? So instead, we have Jentry do a bunch of, like, K-pop poses as she, like, gets her confidence and starts igniting the wheels over and over again, kind of building up, I guess, you know, just her use of the powers and hopefully how long the fire lasts on top of the wheels.
Again! Again! Again!
And I thought this was really weird because it wasn't like she was nervous. She kept being like, bam, like, bam. You know what I mean? Like, she's, like, doing these poses. And I was like, but when you landed, you didn't want to do this because everyone thinks that you're the demon girl. And now you're doing it like it's real chill. So I was like, again, the show is like, it's almost like, did the writer beforehand look at, like, what, like, the couple of steps before? Or are you guys just passing this around? Like, hey, you write something and you write something. You know what I mean? Gentry kind of hits a point where she's like, you can tell in her face she's feeling some type of way. And Grandma's like, all right, let's take a break. And she's like, you sure? She's like, yeah, just go get something to eat. So they're going to head over to the local restaurant of Mimi's. They're like, oh, yeah, let's see if they got, like, cake there. And Ed's like, oh, I like some cake. And they're like, you don't get cake. And they're like, don't you worry. Once we get rid of Mr. Chang, then we're going to figure out how to get rid of you. And then, again, I'm like, but if you have no idea how to get rid of Mr. Chang, because I already know that you don't know how to get rid of Ed, why would you think you could take the big boy on if you can't even take on the little boy? Like, what are we talking about? And it's so weird that, like, Gentry wouldn't even bring, like, Grandma, like, you don't know what you're doing. So this show keeps acting like they're just gonna fly by the seat of their pants and take out a demon they never fought before, even though Grandma's supposed to know, like, what she's supposed to know what she's doing, and clearly, like, she does it. Like, you know, if she's pretending like she got 5 years of experience on her resume and she don't. It doesn't make sense. Okay. Anyways, we go to Mimi's, and this is where Jentry gets a text from her Korean friend, or her friend in Korea. And they're like, oh, like 5 hours to your birthday. And I was like, she didn't explain to her friend why she was leaving. We never got that scene. So I'm like, I think it would have made more sense, but, like, to add a little extra thing of just like, we miss you. You know what I mean? Like, because it doesn't really seem like she's going back anytime soon. And again, they didn't have a moment of like, hey guys, I gotta go, or explain why. So I was like, I feel like that could have also added to, like, I want to have my normal life, but I had to come all the way here back to America instead of staying in Korea. You know what I mean? Anyways, this is where we meet Michael, Gentry's childhood friend, new crush, maybe has always been the crush. He's working at the restaurant. So we get a small scene of Ed by himself. He manages to just, like, blow up and then blow the talisman off his head. So I was like, that's weird. I guess they're not that strong, or maybe they wear off over time or something. And then he steals the wheels from the cabinet, he runs off. We go back to the two of them at the restaurant. Gugu knows that Gentry clearly has a crush on Michael, and I don't know how you wouldn't, because she's just, like, googly eyeing him the entire time. And she's like, let me embarrass you by telling everyone it's your birthday. And then they come over. And, okay, so I hate when people sing at me at a restaurant, okay? Like when the waiter, or like waiter and the staff comes out or whatever. This restaurant does that, and then they put a chicken hat on top of your head, and then they put, like, a chicken beak on your face, and then they sing at you. I would kill myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could not. But that is going on. Gugu looks outside. She sees Ed with the wheels, and he's like, "Oh!" And she's like, "I gotta go. Like, you stay here, and I'll be back later." So she leaves Jentry at the restaurant, but before she leaves, she's like, "Hey, Michael, like, can you go help her out?" So Michael clears out his coworkers, and he's like, "How about you and me just like go for a walk and like kind of catch up?" We follow Gugu chasing Ed, and she like wraps him in a chain, but he of course can transform, so he transforms into like his like half snake form, gets out of it, runs into a warehouse. She follows. We go back, Jentry and Michael, and they're about to go to the park, and they see a tour, and the tour is basically like, "Hey, this is the spot where this demon girl set half the town on fire." Gentry's like, what the hell? And he's like, "Yeah, after the fire we kind of like leaned into it, and it's kind of like made us known for that thing. Like people come from around the world or whatever to like, we're a tourist attraction is what I was looking for. So yeah, that's kind of like how we saved the town." And she's like, "Oh, okay." So like he kind of walks ahead of her, and then we see this flashback of her being a little kid, and like everything's on fire, and she's like crying, and she like shakes it off, and she goes after him. And after at the park, they're kind of teasing each other a little bit, and they're having this conversation of like, she's just like, how did like the fire like affect everything? And he's like, "Well, my parents' house caught on fire, half the town caught on fire, and like businesses caught on fire, and whether if it was a demon girl or just a kid who just happened to make a mistake, like this really affected all of us. So the way that we kind of healed was like turning it into a tourist attraction, almost like we showcased our drama, or like physically like faced our fears and kind of embraced it." And he's like, "Oh, was the fire the reason why you moved to Korea?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." And it was clearly setting up the fact of like, she feels awful about this thing happening, and then at some point, whether it's this season or if there's a next season, he's obviously going to find out that she was the reason that this happened in the first place, and there'll be tension because I noticed things about TV shows. Before this actually happened, there was a small scene where Gugu and Ed are still fighting over the wheels. He goes and puts them in this like grinding machine, and he's like, "You're screwed," and he presses a button. The machine's not even plugged in, and he's like, "Oh!" And so he goes to go after Grandma. She throws another talisman on his head, and she goes and bow, knocks him out. Grandma's setting up this barrier. They're like in a empty park. She has this like rope with a bunch of bells on it. Ed is there tied up, and she's like, "All right, Jentry, like it's time to go. Like Mr. Chang's gonna be here. Set the wheels on fire, and we'll get this shit popping." And of course, Jentry feels even more like shit after hanging out with Michael and seeing like they're glorifying the fire and just like everything that he's lost, and just the whole thing of like, I did this when I was a little kid, which is why, again, going back to earlier when she was saying the wheel on fire, like it was cool. I was like, did you not really think about like how this traumatized you before? So I thought that part was weird, like going into now where it makes sense, where she's like, I don't want to do this, and Grandma's like, it's showtime, like he's about to show up right now, like I need you to like get over yourself, kind of, and like set the things on fire. But before she can even kind of consider it, Mr. Chang shows up, and he's like this ghost thing with a mask on his face, and he's like, "Yo, long time no see, Jentry, it's time to give me your powers." And of course they're not about it, and he's like, "Listen, Grandma, you and me had a deal. If you guys want to go back on it, I guess we'll have to throw the hands." This is where Grandma locks in, and again, it's so unclear like how much she knows, how much she doesn't know, because she like does a blast and then puts up like a barrier and then she starts like throwing some punches and kicks and stuff. I think very early into the fight, or like right before it started, Mr. Chang breaks the wheels, so that was out the thing. But like she's kind of holding her own, like she's not winning, but she's like doing a little bit. But I was just like, how much do you know? Because it's so unclear. But eventually she starts getting her ass handed to her. And then Mr. Chang grabs Jentry, he goes to stab Jentry, and as he goes to do that, it hits her neck, or her necklace protects her essentially, and like pushes him back. And Grandma seems confused by this for like a small second. She's like, "Oh, like you're alive. I'm so glad you're alive."
Jentry! I love you, Jentry Chau. Jentry!
I'm like, did you not know that the necklace did this? Like, how much do you know? You seem so useless. And of course, at this moment, she sees something, pushes Jentry out the way. She gets stabbed. Grandma's dead. I could not give a fuck because this is the first episode, and I'm like, you didn't give me a chance to really attach to the grandma. Like I keep saying, she seems like she doesn't know what she's doing, so I'm like, of course she got killed. Like, what did you expect? But of course, Jentry is sad, and this is where her powers start to activate. And before she can even do anything, Mr. Chang goes and he grabs her, starts yanking out her soul. But through the power of will or whatever, she manages to put it back inside of herself. Her third eye opens, and she sends out a blast of fire. It doesn't seem to work at first, but then she pushes a little harder, and she pushes him through a portal, because when her powers activated, a portal opened for some reason. And she pushes him through a portal. Her powers deactivate. I think I forgot to mention this earlier, but when they were at Grandma's house originally, she was like, you can't see ghosts because your third eye isn't open yet. So now that her third eye is open, she can see ghosts, which is why when she comes back down, she starts crying over her grandma. Her grandma's like, yo, I'm still alive, but like in ghost form. She's like, Grandma, I'm so sorry. And she's like, it's whatever. Like, you saved the day. It's all good. As they're trying to have this like heartful moment, Ed rolls over and he's like, hey guys, did you think about that thing over there?
Don't mean to interrupt, but what are you guys gonna do about that?
And they look over and they see the portal, and the portal, something is about to pop out of it, and then the episode ends. And before it like ends, and you hit the credits, they do this season on Jentry Chau. And as they're flickering through all these images of like what's going to happen this season, I'm like, everything looks so generic. Like the friend's getting powers, and I'm like, all right, he's probably gonna see visions of like figuring that out. And Jentry seems like she's making friends in Texas, but I'm like, are we gonna go back to the friends in Korea and like talk to them? Like, does she care that she's not in Korea anymore? Because it seemed like she had a chill thing, and her whole thing was like, I want a normal life. And she says that throughout this little thing, but I'm like, do you miss where we saw you in the beginning, or is that just like a weird setup? Honestly, as all these things were passing by, the most interesting thing is it seems like they're setting up a fact of like, Grandma knows something, and she's hiding something from Jentry, and Jentry feels some type of way about it so much that the two of them are gonna fight at some point.
Google is hiding something, and I need to know the truth.
Keeping things from Jentry doesn't mean she can't trust me.
Can you even hear yourself?
You wanted the truth? Are you sure you're ready for it?
And that was like the only thing that was like, ooh, that might be interesting. But everything else was just kind of like, eh. I didn't really care. So if it's your first time here, I have a 3-point rating scale. It is 1 and done. Give it a chance, and I'm in. For this one, 1 and done. This show is so much, and again, I know it's skewed for a younger audience, but this show is like joke first, realism pretty much never. Like there's no like really sitting with anything, whether it's Jentry having her powers or like what's really going on or how much does Grandma actually know. Like it's just like joke, and it's like, can we have a moment to like have her like really like wrap her head around like this is weird? You know what I mean? The thing is like, this also kind of, when I saw the trailers, reminded me of like Star versus the Forces of Evil. And if you've never seen that, it's like Star's from this magical place, and she meets this regular kid called Marco. And Marco is essentially like the, stand in for the audience of like, I'm just a regular boy, and you're doing all this magic stuff, and it's weird and doesn't make sense. And I felt like this show, Jentry should have been that character, and then sometimes she is, and sometimes she's just kind of like, like, Grandma, you ever seen this demon before? Like, you know what I mean? And there's nothing that's like, no one's fully just being the grounded character. And then with Grandma being like, sometimes you know what you're doing, sometimes you don't know what you're doing. It all depends on the plot of the first episode. It's like, what are we gonna do going forward? And then Ed, I could care less for, and I could tell just from the moment I met him that I was like, oh, they're trying to like set him up as like the sidekick. You know, he used to be my enemy, but now like we're best friends, type thing. And it just felt like this show really needed, or at least this first episode needed like another draft. You know what I mean? They needed some edits. Again, even with this season on Jentry Chau, was like, again, the only thing that interests me was like the potential fight between Jentry and her grandma. But like, if you watch the kids show, usually it's like, all right, we're just gonna hug it out, and then they'll like go separate ways. I don't think it'll hit like, this doesn't feel like it'll have the emotional resonance of something like Steven Universe, which if you've never seen, it probably just looks like all bubbly and stuff. But like, sometimes that show would handle something like abusive relationships, and you're like, what? In a kid's show? And I just don't think this show is like gonna have that. I may be wrong. I have no plans on watching the rest of the season, so if I'm wrong, please let me know. Or if there's like a scene or episode I should watch, and if you've watched it, let me know. I'll check it out. But yeah, I just didn't vibe with this first episode. Just too joke forward. Grandma doesn't know what she's doing. Not enough of a grounded situation, and just like a lot of like, why why is this happening, why do that, you know? That's where I'm gonna leave this episode. If you feel like I don't even know what I was gonna say. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.